How's it going, everybody? Welcome to my channel. I hope that you're all doing great. Today we're going to talk about one of the main topics that has really helped me out in the past 3 or 4 years. I would say ever since I became interested and intrigued about this topic and found out about it via a book that we're going to discuss today. The book that we're going to talk about today is called Codependent No More by Melody Beattie. And this book has truly changed my life ever since I read it and ever since I started implementing the concepts that it discusses. So this book came out, I believe, like 25, maybe 30 years ago at this point, and ever since its publication, it has helped thousands, if not millions of people, me included in that list, and it has had tremendous benefits in my life, I would say in all areas of my life, and I wanted to discuss that with you because it's definitely my top 10, best books to read of all time. And in 2020, I believe, I made a video series on my YouTube channel called Book Recommendations for Every Enneagram Type, which is a personality typing system. I'm a type 9, so in the type 9 recommendation book series, I recommended this book as one of the books for type 9s. I would say type 9s and type 2s would disproportionately benefit from this book, Codependent No More. So here we go. So what is codependent? I'm going to talk a little bit about my own journey and coming upon this book and a little bit of my experience with this book, and then kind of talk about what is codependent as defined in this book. Again, my whole kind of frame of reference for codependency or being codependent no more has come from this book, Codependent No More. So I'm going to primarily discuss topics discussed in this book, and anytime I'm pulling references or definitions or terms that I will discuss, they are all from this book. So unneeded to say or needless to say, if any of the recommendations in this video resonate with you, any of the topics discussed resonate with you, you should go grab it and check it out for yourself because it dives way more deeply into the topics discussed in this video. So if anything resonates, needless to say, check out that book, Codependent No More. So let's begin. My journey with this book or this concept began, I would say, in 2019 when I became familiar with the Enneagram. And as I was studying the Enneagram and discovering my personality type, which is type 9, I became more and more aware of some tendencies that type 9s kind of demonstrate, such as not having good separation from people, which is funny because a lot of the spiritual concepts that I study are kind of anti-separation and are all about oneness. But this was something that kind of enlightened me to, I actually, for my type 9 and my personality habits, I need separation. And so I became kind of aware, but until later, I didn't really have like a phrase for like needing separation. I didn't have like a term for it or a phrase for it. But later when I discovered this book, I felt like it described me to a T. Sometimes certain books are so uncomfortable for me to read because they're too accurate, they're too spot on, they're too descriptively accurate about who you are as a person, and they describe you and your personality too perfectly. That's too close to home and feels uncomfortable. And that was certainly my experience with this book, where it felt too close to home, uncomfortable, uneasy, but overall and ultimately beneficial, because that's how you gain, I would say, the most benefits from books if when they are making you uncomfortable and uneasy at first because they are so close to home and spot on and revealing, but then they offer you benefits or solutions to overcome those tendencies that they're pointing out to you or those uncomfortable truths that they are revealing to you. Then they kind of offer you a solution on what to do with this stuff that they just kind of reveal to you about you. And this book certainly did that for me and has been extremely beneficial. So let's talk about a little bit what is the term codependent as defined by Melody Beattie in Codependent No More. So here's the actual definition that is in the book. A codependent person is one who has let another person's behavior affect him or her and who is obsessed with controlling that person's behavior. So a lot of us, upon hearing that, may say, that's me. I mean, I feel like a lot of us would be saying, that's me. I mean, which one of us hasn't let someone else's kind of behavior affect us to some degree? But I think the key point here is obsessed with controlling that person's behavior, meaning that you're no longer your own person, where that person's behavior affects you so much that for you to feel good, you have to make them feel good or behave a certain way for you to feel good. So that to me indicates that there's no separation there. There's no separate I and you. There's just like one person. And as long as that one person is happy, then I'm happy. Or, as long as she or he behaves, then I will feel good about myself. So that is a clear indication that there's not enough separation. And there is, in our childhood and development, there's an individuation process or individuation stage or separation process where we separate from our primary kind of caretaker or individuate from, let's say, our mother or our father, whoever is, the person that we are closest to. And I think some of us have kind of like a misfiring separation or a separation phase that doesn't take place, an individuation phase that doesn't take place fully or doesn't go into effect effectively, and it causes problems later on where we may have people where we're trying to control their behavior so much so that our behavior, our mood feels good. And it's so much dependent on the other person versus ourselves. And that is a clear indication that that separation process, that individuation process that happens in childhood didn't really fully take place. And we didn't fully separate ourselves. And now later in life, it's rearing its head. Now, the term codependent and this whole concept came about through alcoholics, but not necessarily alcoholics, the caretakers of alcoholics. This espouses the wives and husbands of an alcoholic. So they noticed this pattern where people who had an alcoholic in their family and who were kind of like the caretaker, the pattern that they noticed is that there was a common thread amongst all these caretakers of the alcoholics. And that pattern was like, that person's, the alcoholics in this case, behavior affected the caretakers so much. This was kind of a universal experience, all of them, so much where they were no longer their own person. They were so obsessed with controlling the behaviors of the alcoholic. Like, let me just get him not to drink. Let me just get him to apply for a job. Let me just get him to X, Y, and Z. And then I will feel good. It's like all obsessed with their behavior. And it's affecting them so much that they are obsessively trying to control the other person's behavior, in this case, alcoholics, to feel good. They are no longer a separate identity or a person. They are the alcoholics. Like, they're just completely merged with them, where they are like one, which, you would tell, I guess, some spiritual people, and they're like, oh, that's great. They're one, they have achieved, enlightenment, but this is far from enlightenment. It's still a need for separation there. And it's not high up on the rungs of the ladder, let's say, to enlightenment. This is far from that. And there is a need for separation in this case to take place for benefits to arise actually in this situation. So nonetheless, that situation, the observation that people had via these, I guess they call Al-Anons or something like that. I'm not sure exactly of the terminology, but it's basically like an Alcoholics Anonymous group for not the alcoholics, but the caretakers of the alcoholics. So this term kind of had, and this concept had its origination via that community, but it applies to a much larger, broader community at large. But then again, they were kind of the community that originated. So that's just kind of some background of how the term codependent came into being, how the concept originated and arose, and now we have it to use as phrase or term that we can use to discuss a very specific type of behavior or attitude or situation that may arise in people's lives, including myself. I struggle with it a lot. It wasn't due to an alcoholic's behavior at all, which is why I was saying that it's not limited to that, but it was in a different situation. Okay, now that we discussed a little bit about what being codependent means and its definition and description, which we could go a lot more in depth into that, and for doing so, I recommend picking up Codependent No More and reading it for yourself, because it can cover in a much more advanced way the concepts and the descriptions that we're giving here and offering here. But now that we've kind of on a more surface level, to say, or introductory basic level, discuss what being a codependent means, what codependency is, what are some solutions or tips and advice and guidance that Melody Beattie offers in the book Codependent No More in order to overcome and beat codependency, in order to, let's say, get a life, get our own lives, and be separate from the other individuals who we are obsessed about controlling their behavior so that we feel good. How do we separate ourselves, our emotions, our mood, our behavior, our actions from them? How do we go about that? What are some solutions and practical tips that we can gain from Codependent No More that can help us? So I'm going to go chapter by chapter, because once Melody Beattie explains the term codependency, once she defines that and gives that description, then the whole rest of the chapters are all about practical solutions and tips on how to overcome being a codependent, to be and become codependent no more. So let's talk about chapter by chapter. These are all brief descriptions of some of the solutions and practical tips that are offered in Codependent No More. So the first tip that Melody Beattie discusses in this book, in Codependent No More, is detachment. Now, that may sound simple, and it is simple in a sense, but it's not necessarily easy to do. And she basically recommends, like, if you have to detach in love or detach in hate, like, of course you want to shoot for like the higher route of detachment, where you detach in peace and you create detachment in love and like peace, and you have kind of more of a more, I guess, peaceful approach to it, or more like almost like an enlightened approach to it. But she's like, kind of like either way you have to do it, create that detachment. And by detachment, it means create separation between you and that other person's behavior that you are so obsessed about controlling, whether there be an alcoholic or otherwise. So basically, this is when we let go of others' lives and start to live our own life. It's basically being responsible for ourselves, not responsible for others' behavior and others' actions. It's creating that separate identity. You detach from them and care for you, care less for them, be less concerned with what's going on in their life, and create that detachment from them. So the second tip that Melody Beattie recommends in Codependent No More is don't be blown away by every wind. And basically it means don't be so reactive, don't be so moving and shaky in your emotional state. And I know this takes a while to get to. That's why there are so many books and videos and courses and all kinds of things on how to be stoic, be more like grounded and not emotionless, but less, moved with the wind, more sturdy and solid in your emotional state, and have that solid emotional state. But basically, don't be blown away by every wind means, don't be reactive. Notice when you're allowing someone else to control your emotions and pull your emotional strings. And it's just notice it. Notice that you're being reactive to someone else. You're allowing that person's behavior to control your mood and your emotions. And once you notice it, try not to do it. Try not to give into it. Try not to let them pull your strings. You become the master of your own kingdom. You pull your own strings, let's say. And so that is kind of the second tip. Now, a lot of these tips obviously are easy to say, hard to implement. But then again, that hard is a perception, right? Because you can start with something being hard to implement, but as you start to practice these new skill sets, they become easier to use. So something that was hard to implement is now you have ease of use with it. So for all of these practical tips that we're going and these solutions that we're going to discuss in this video, that is the case. They are, you could say, hard to implement at first because they are new, they're unknown, but they become easier to implement as you practice them. Look at them more as skill sets that you can improve upon versus things that you should like already be able to like instantly kind of do. But some of them you can definitely instantly, and all of them you can start to instantly implement. Like, don't be blown about by every wind. Try to be less reactive. Try to notice when you're allowing someone else to pull your strings and be less reactive. You can start to immediately practice that now. And then as you practice that skill set, you just improve upon that. So let's move on to the next practical tip. The next one is set yourself free is the next practical tip we're going to discuss. So set yourself free is a chapter title All of these practical tips that we're talking about are chapter titles in Codependent No More, where she goes much more in depth in each of these topics. So if you want to learn more about any of these practical tips, again, check out Codependent No More. But set yourself free, in short, means start taking care, and that's actually a term that's used in Codependent No More a lot, is take care of yourself, take care of yourself. But start taking care of yourself and leave others alone. Again, simple tip, similar to detachment, but start to set yourself free. Start to take care of yourself more, because caretakers, and it's not like the case that every codependent is necessarily a caretaker. I think the dynamics could be a multitude of situations, but in a very traditional sense, the caretakers were like the most common form of codependence. But start taking care of yourself, because codependents are not taking care of themselves. They're so obsessed with the other person's behavior that they're not caretaking themselves. And we are responsible for ourselves, and we have to carry our own weights, and we're not responsible for others' behaviors. We are responsible for ourselves. But caretakers / codependents, sometimes like they are not taking that responsibility for themselves and taking care of themselves. So this is just a point to start caring for you. You deserve to be cared for, and start taking care of yourself, and being responsible for yourself, and start to leave others alone. The next tip in Codependent No More is remove the victim. So this is basically, this chapter from what I got is talking a lot about how caretakers / you can say maybe chronic codependence is where like they're constantly looking for someone new to like take care of. This is when caretaking has become, in a sense, toxic, and it's like the caretaker or the codependent is constantly looking for a victim to rescue. And this is to remove the victim. Stop looking for victims that you can rescue, because codependents, sometimes the only times they feel a sense of purpose is when they're rescuing. And so this is an encouragement to remove the victim, remove this idea like keeping looking for victims, and notice that you yourself are a victim also. You are a victim in a different sense. You are a victim, you can say, of this codependent situations that you created. So remove you also as the victim. Remove this idea of looking for a victim, and remove yourself as a victim of these situations as well. And so that is kind of just a tip on removing the victim, removing the mentality of finding a victim to rescue. So remove the victim, and that includes yourself as well. The next practical tip that Melody Beattie shares in Codependent No More is called undependence. And undependence is basically very practical. All of these are meant to be practical. They're not meant to be esoteric necessarily. They're meant to be very practical, grounded, down to the root where you can apply it now. But undependence means, in a very practical sense, figure out who you're dependent on, whether it's financially, living situation, housing, etc., and start to build the foundation to be less dependent on them. It's very hard to be independent and use this practical tip of undependence if you have to live with someone. You are like stuck in a situation where you rely on someone for some things, and the person you are codependent with is, you are relying on them. You are bound to them. It's very hard to overcome that codependent situation, create that undependence, if you are dependent on them for very realistic means, such as income, housing, whatever else it may be. So in a very practical way, figure out how you're dependent, especially on that person that you're codependent with, and start to lay the foundation, the practical foundation of creating that independence, whether it's financial or otherwise. The next practical tip that is shared in Codependent No More by Melody Beattie is live your own life. And that's basically just an encouragement and a reminder again to start taking care of yourself. Again, codependents, they don't live their own life. They have, in a sense, put their own life on the back burner. It's their own life has taken the backseat to someone else's life. They have neglected to live their own life, and they are living almost like through someone else, because it's like the drama or the action or the goals and the dreams of their life is all through that other person's behavior. Like, I can only achieve my goals and dreams, you know, through obsessively trying to control that other person's behavior. And they have neglected to live their own life. They are not a main kind of star role player in their own video game, in their own movie of their life. They have neglected to live their own life. So this is just an encouragement to live your own life. Don't be so obsessed with controlling other person's behavior and living through their life. So that's for that practical tip. On to the next practical tip. The next practical tip in Codependent No More is make a love affair with yourself. And this is basically, to say love yourself. Codependents are sometimes like self-hating. There are a lot of ways that they hate themselves. I think one of the practices in Codependent No More is like maybe writing all the ways that you are mean to yourself, that you hate yourself. And just the act of putting it on paper, I think, is very eye-opening for a lot of codependents. But basically, this practical tip is to stop self-hate and bring in the self-love, because you need that self-love to be empowered, to make the moves that you need to make to create that independence, to be codependent no more. So self-love is crucial in your life if you are trying to be codependent no more. So on to the next practical tip. The next practical tip in Codependent No More is to learn the art of acceptance. And this is just an encouragement to accept or bring acceptance more to what is. I would say there are a lot more better books written on this topic than Codependent No More. I would say The Power of Now is phenomenal by Eckhart Tolle in this regard. Radical Acceptance. And again, a lot of these books that I just mentioned were published after Codependent No More, first publication came out or first edition came out. So a lot of those weren't even available, but now they are. And I think those are much better at discussing the topic of acceptance and teaching acceptance. But this is an encouragement to bring acceptance to your life now. And acceptance, Melody Beattie talks about this prayer, this serenity prayer, or a prayer of acceptance. This is something that is used a lot in, I would say, Alcoholics Anonymous, and also in the concepts in Codependent No More. It has been mentioned multiple times in the book, so I'll just recite it here for you. It says, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So that is the serenity prayer, or like you could say almost like the prayer of acceptance, because it's been mentioned in Codependent No More a lot, and it's in conjunction with acceptance. A lot of times when the term or the phrase acceptance is mentioned, there is some sort of mention to this prayer, because it kind of encapsulates the concept of acceptance the way that we are discussing it in Codependent No More. So try to bring more acceptance to what is, because that does actually help codependents become codependent no more. So on to the next practical tip. The next practical tip in this video or in this book is called Feel Your Own Feelings. And Feel Your Own Feelings, I would say the best book, but also like a video recommendation, not to plug my own videos here, but I'm going to plug one of my own videos here. It's called the Letting Go Technique Explained. It's on my channel. I'll link it up here. And this video is all about exactly this. Again, I believe this book, Letting Go, Pathway of Surrender by Dr. David R. Hawkins, was published after Codependent No More. And if it wasn't, I would think that there would have been some mention of it here, because it so accurately describes what Melody Beattie is trying to allude to in this chapter. But basically, the letting go technique is a technique in feeling your own feelings, but also just in general in the concept of Codependent No More. Feel your own feelings. Start to become more in touch with your own feelings. Feel your own feelings, because codependents are oftentimes very empathetic. They are almost better at feeling, because they have attuned themselves to be better at feeling that other person's moods and emotions and feelings, because they are so obsessed about controlling that other person's behavior. So they have become highly sensitive to other people's moods, so that they can predict how to behave themselves and how to solicit or to go about basically trying to change that person's behavior to get what they want. They've become so good at feeling not their own feelings, but others' feelings. And this is to reverse that. Start to feel your own feelings, because again, that's a big part of the journey of becoming codependent no more. So the next chapter in the book, Codependent No More, the next practical tip is about anger. I have a video that I made with my Sifu, which means teacher, Mr. Tom Bowman, on another channel called Qigong of Tulsa. I'll link it below, also up there. But this video is about kind of liver cleansing and liver in our bodies. I practice Qigong, and liver is tied to the emotion of anger a lot. So a lot of people who have issues with their liver may hold a lot of anger and have issues with anger in some shape or form. So there is a Qigong exercise that's recommended in that video for liver, but it's for anger as well. So I recommend you checking that out. But basically, anger is something that a codependent needs to start to feel. A lot of times they have such repressed anger and emotions and resentment that's it's insane just how much is repressed. It's definitely like it's like a pressure cooker, a volcano that's just like steaming and brewing. But the codependents need to feel their anger and find good mediums to let the anger go, whether it's through exercise, cleaning the house, like whatever it is. Like they need to figure out a way to channel the anger, because it's gonna like eat them up alive basically, and they need to find a way to express the anger, to let it go so that it doesn't build up like a pressure cooker, and let that steam out. Ideally, you want to, because there might be so much of it, you want to find a safe space or a safe medium to let it out. But it helps a lot to tap into that anger, because anger, actually, I would recommend a video I made recently called I'll talk about the book Power versus Force. It will be linked up here. But there's this concept of map of consciousness. You can look it up online. But this map of consciousness shows the level of like the human emotional spectrum, so to speak. And anger, you see that has more energy than a lot of other emotions like guilt, shame, apathy, these kind of states that are super low on the vibrational scale. Anger is actually a move in the right direction to generate action. A lot of people have changed their situation for the better when they got in touch with their anger. When the anger that was repressed finally was tapped into and became an energy resource to help them move them into a better situation. And so a lot of times codependents need to tap into that anger and resentment and the bitterness that they've built up and repressed, because it gives them the emotion, the fire, and the fuel that they need to take off and get themselves to be codependents no more. The next practical tip that's mentioned in Codependent No More is trust that you can think. And this is just to say, trust your ability to think. This comes from basically the concept or the premise that codependents have so much not relied on their own thinking faculties. They've been so obsessed with controlling other person's behaviors. And it's like, other person, to a point that they have forgotten that they have the ability to think, to make their own plans. It's like their life has been so wrapped up around someone else's drama, someone else's plan, someone else's behavior and actions, that they have forgotten that they can plan, they can think, they can solve and come up with solutions for their own problems, etc. So this is just an encouragement to, yes, you can think. Trust that you have the ability to think. And I know that sounds like so rudimentary, but like it is true. This was empowering for me to think about that. Like, hey, I can take responsibility for my life and think and use my mind to think and think myself into better situations and make plans. Take responsibility, create a better situation for myself through my mind's faculties and thinking. So on to the next practical tip. So the next practical tip is to set your own goals, or start to set your own goals. And this is very related to the last point, but basically starting to set your own goals, it's something that does lead to living a much happier life for the codependents, because goals, what they do is they like focus your attention and awareness onto like a practical point. You're like, I am trying to go there. Now, all your awareness from being this broad like spectrum gets focused on like narrow focus of like, okay, how can I solve this problem? How can I, now that my awareness, it's like it turns into like a broad light into a focal point. And if you've ever done that experiment with a magnifying glass where you bring the broad light into a focal point, it can burn through paper, it can cause a fire, it can become that powerful. So that's what the goals do, is they bring your awareness into a focal point, and they give you a focal point of focus for your awareness, which can be immensely powerful. It can lead you to live a happier life by being able to create plans and create a better situation for your life. So starting to set your own goals for a codependent is massive, because they are living through other people's goals, if that other person even has goals, but they have neglected or forgotten that they have the ability to set their own goals and ask themselves, what do I want? and then do that. That's the thing. Make plans, use their mind, again, last point, to trust their thinking ability and make the plans necessary. Write the things that they need to do, figure out what they need to do to accomplish the goals that gets them to what they want. And this is all part of taking care of themselves and taking care of yourself. So that's all for that practical tip. On to the next practical tip. The next practical tip, and I'm sure there are better books on this topic, but it's about communication. And the main point I took away from this chapter is to just say what you need to say. So a lot of times I think codependence, and it's hard in a codependent situation because there's a lot of like resentment and anger and all the bitterness and all this stuff. So it can really muddy up communication, where you need to say what you need to say, but then it gets muddied up with resentment and bitterness and all kinds of other things. So, I would recommend some other books, maybe like How to Have Difficult Conversations, or some other books by like doctors like Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend. These are the authors of the book Boundaries, but they have a ton of other books in their book, library, so to speak, and books that I've written that have to do with communication skills, and they have all been phenomenal that I've checked out. So I would recommend their books when it comes to the topic of communication, learning those communication skills and how to have those difficult conversations. But nonetheless, the main point here is to say what you need to say, because yes, there may be all this resentment and bitterness and all this stuff, but like learning to communicate effectively and say what you need to say and say your piece, ideally you do it from a place of like love, if you can do love. But if you can't do love, from a place of acceptance or neutrality. And if you can do it, like, I guess sometimes it may come out with hate and anger that's just can't be bothered. Like, it's just unavoidable almost at that point because there's so much of it. But nonetheless, the main point that Melody Beattie was trying to make in this chapter is like, you need to learn to say what you need to say. You need to learn to say the truth that is within your heart, to speak that out, because there's all this resentment built up. There's all this stuff built up and repressed. It just needs to be expressed and communicated, and trying to communicate that effectively. So I would definitely recommend reading some books on effective communication, like the ones I mentioned, how to have difficult conversations, etc. And then learning how to communicate effectively from those, and then having the communications, saying what you need to say, and having that effective communication with the person that you are codependent with, or in the codependent relationship with. So on to the next practical tip. The next point that Melody Beattie makes in this book is work a 12-step program. Now, I personally have never done a 12-step program, but she definitely swears by it. A lot of people have benefited from it, I'm sure in the millions at this point. But basically, she says that you just keep showing up, and you keep showing up, and you keep doing the work. You go to the meetings, and the magic of it will work. And you just have to trust that. You just have to go until the magic works. And I guess like I can kind of apply that to working out, because I used to be a personal trainer, and I used to always say like to people, give it like 3 months, give it 4 weeks. Okay, if you can't wait that long, give it 4 weeks before you expect any results. Give it 3 months before you expect any results. And when you do that, then the results, the incremental results add up, and then in 3 months they are a substantial result. And so I can relate to that in that sense of working out, where if you work out, for 4 months, let's say, you then see the results. So 12-step program, I'm sure it's very similar, where it's like there might be incremental results, almost unnoticeable, but then you one day notice them. It's like, boom, you get from incremental results to substantial result. And again, her recommendation was to just go to the meetings until the magic works on you, and it will work. So she swears by it. Again, I don't have personal experience with this, so she has a lot more experience with this, and she has helped a lot of codependents and has seen this work with them. So work a 12-step program. Alcoholics Anonymous, not Alcoholics Anonymous, because I think that's specifically obviously for alcoholics, but there's Al-Anon, I believe, is the one that's for like the people with those. But also I'm sure there's a lot of like different groups for that, for 12 steps, all kinds of different ones. And I'm sure there's probably like Codependent Anonymous or something like that. But nonetheless, just work a 12-step program. Maybe pick up a book about it, but find a meeting nearby and join those 12-step program meetings. I think it will be tremendously beneficial in really all areas of life, because it's like no matter what the vice is, there is probably a 12-step program surrounding it at this point. So check the 12-step programs out. So the next practical tip, and this is the last practical tip, the last chapter of the book, Codependent No More by Melody Beattie, is learning to live and love again, which is kind of like the encapsulating formula of everything that's discussed in Codependent No More. It's the ultimate. It's the hierarchy. It's like the Maslow's hierarchy. That's like this self-realization is at the top. This is to learning to. That's what this is, learning to live and love again. It's for the codependent to learn to live their own life again, remember their own person, and to love again, because it may have become difficult for them to open their heart after the experiences that they've had and love again. But this is an encouragement to do that. And one thing I wrote down from that chapter, it's from Melody Beattie herself. She said, just keep doing the things we know we need to do. It will get better. And basically, this is just to trust that the process, trust these steps. It's kind of like, again, going to that workout metaphor. It's like, just trust what the personal trainer is putting in front of you, the workouts, the exercise regimen that the personal trainer has given you. Trust that process and trust the formula, and then you will see the results. You just have to apply the process. You have to go through that workout regimen in this metaphor, in this example, and then you get to see the progress and the results. But you have to trust that process and apply the regimen. And this is the same thing with this. Is trust the process, do the things that you know will work and that we need to, and it will get better. And last thing I wrote is just start taking care of ourselves. Again, codependents are notorious for not taking care of themselves, always taking care of others. Start to take care of yourself. What it is that you need, start to give that to yourself. Write the goals that you need, write the actions that you need, take action, make the plans, and start to take care of yourself. It's not just bubble baths, although it could be that, but there's like a lot of other things involved in taking care of yourself. So start to take care of yourself, give yourself what you need, because you have neglected to meet your own needs. And this is an encouragement to start meeting your needs and taking care of yourself, and taking responsibility for yourself and taking care of yourself, giving yourself what you need and meeting your needs, because you deserve it. And you have done so much for others, and you deserve the love that you have been giving to others. You deserve that love for yourself, and you're worthy of that love and deserving of that love. So give yourself that love, begin to take care of yourself. Check out Codependent No More, as I believe it will have immeasurable benefits for you, or for really anyone. I don't even think like you need to even resonate with the term codependent for it to have benefits, because a lot of the things that are mentioned in this book are practical tips that are timeless and helpful practices that one can implement to gain benefits in many areas of their lives, not just limited to codependence, but certainly those who struggle with codependency will find Codependent No More of immeasurable and immense value. And I certainly benefited so much from this book that I couldn't believe I've gone this long without reading Codependent No More. So it was amazing, and I just wanted to share the benefits I received from that book with you, share some of the signs of codependency she kind of mentioned, share the phrase codependent, share the little bit of like the history of the codependent term coming into being, and then just like offer those practical tips and solutions that we just went over. So I hope that these practical tips and solutions prove to be beneficial for you, and that you find them as beneficial as I did in my journey of reading Codependent No More and applying these practices and gaining the benefits from these said practices. So that is it. That's Codependent No More in a nutshell. I know there's a lot more to go in depth, but this is more like an overview or a summary or a review of Codependent No More by Melody Beattie, an incredible book with an incredible history of helping thousands, if not millions of people at this point over the course of the last 25, 30 years that's been published. So I sincerely hope that you guys check out Codependent No More by Melody Beattie, that you find it helpful and of immeasurable value as I have, and find it as beneficial as I have. And, you know, again, my sincerest hope is that this was truly helpful for you. And if it was, please subscribe to my channel and give this video a like. Again, my name is PJ, and I hope to see you guys in the next video publication on this channel. And until then, take care, and I will talk to you soon.